Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to today's show. Today the herb we're going to discuss comes from my book, The Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast. And as always, I should mention that weeds and grasses grow everywhere. This is part of my series of medicinal plants that can be found growing in the American Southeast, but you will find 99% of these anywhere in North America, most of South America, and certainly Western Europe. And well, actually, several of them come from Asia as well. They were brought here and naturalized. One of these days, I'm going to look into why we have so many Japanese plants in this region. We have a lot. I don't know why. They seem to have been very popular around 1900 or so. People were importing a lot of Japanese ornamentals and some vegetables, but mainly ornamental plants. And this is, kudzu aside. I know how the history of kudzu. These just are now common weeds in much of the United States. But the one we'll get into today is really interesting. It is Erechtites, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the second half of the name. Okay, I'll try. Hieracifolius. Erechtites hieracifolius, perhaps. It's usually called Burnweed, American Burnweed. Some places it's called Fireweed. It's one of about, I don't even know, 3 to 5 plants, if not more, that are called Fireweed. So we have to kind of break down the common names on that. But I'm going to go with Erechtites on this one. And very interesting, very useful plant. Very common plant. You're going to find a lot of great uses for this. But as always, we like to start with the recipe for the week. And this recipe comes from my new book, The Spring Foraging Cookbook. Now, this is one with which you'll probably be fairly familiar. It's alfalfa. You may know alfalfa as a cover crop, feed for cattle. You may know alfalfa sprouts. That's the way I grew up eating them. You can harvest several parts of alfalfa throughout the year. Let me just go ahead and get into this because it's really, it's the first plant listed in this book, Spring Foraging Cookbook, and it really kind of set the tone for the whole book. But I didn't have time to discuss it yesterday, so I actually did plant number 2, which had a shorter entry. So I use alfalfa mostly interchangeably with clovers, and I really do enjoy it. However, many modern authors caution, I should say, against consumption of alfalfa. I don't agree with them whatsoever. Some people warn you against eating legumes, and alfalfa is a leguminous plant. The human species has been eating beans and peas and other, peanuts and etc. for thousands of years. And yes, some members of the legume family are toxic, and some of our commonly eaten beans are actually slightly toxic if they're not cooked before eating. So some people say you shouldn't eat alfalfa. I think they're full of it. personally. My mom was a hippie. She was into the health food stores and such. I grew up eating alfalfa sprouts. I've probably eaten 3 times my body weight in alfalfa sprouts throughout my life. Okay, and I'm 6'4", 210 pounds lean, strong as an ox basically, and I've never had any trouble with alfalfa. And I eat it, find it in the wild. I grow the sprouts. Really, to me, I don't see alfalfa sprouts as being a health food. I like them for the flavor, but as a prepper as well, sprouts are something you can have in the wintertime when nothing's growing outside in the garden that you can eat. Full of vitamins, full of nutrition, good fiber, which you need in the wintertime in a survival situation. So I keep several plants, several seeds, and whatever to sprout. I've got alfalfa seeds. I've got lentils, mung beans, so many different ones. And all you really have to do is just put them in a jar, soak them in water, pour the water off, cover the jar with a cloth, stick it back in a cabinet until they start to sprout. They'll sprout, white, and then sit them in a sunny windowsill to green them up, and you've got a nutritious, basically free food. I mean, like you can fill a quart jar with any of these sprouts, alfalfa or whatever, for maybe like 2-3 cents when it comes to if you actually had to buy the seeds or the lentils or whatever. If you were ordering them from a company that does sprouts and microgreens, still maybe about $1.50 for, I don't know, 8 nice big servings out of that jar. Or you can keep mung beans and such going just between a couple paper towels. You don't even have to do the jar method. And there's so many sprouts. To me, that's a real survival food. So, I actually really do prioritize sprouts in my planning for my prepping, my planning for any kind of emergency where I may not be able to get to a store, and it may be the dead of winter, and I need some vegetation to eat, as well as, some salted meats and some potatoes that are stored away. You need some green vegetables so you don't get scurvy, and, so you stay regular and all that good stuff. So, but yeah, alfalfa sprouts were like super popular in the 70s and 80s. So my mom put them in like everything. With every meal, we had some sprouts on a salad. She put them on sandwiches. A lot of times I would just go to the refrigerator as a kid, pull out the thing of alfalfa sprouts, grab a handful of them and just stuff them in my mouth, or maybe put a little salad dressing on it, just stuff it in my mouth as a snack. And like I said, it certainly never hurt me by any means. So, but I got a lot of food memories connected to alfalfa sprouts as well. So anyway, but one of my favorite ways to eat alfalfa sprouts is on a sandwich. And I think, like I said, this recipe kind of sets the tone of the book because it emphasizes that I'm definitely not a vegan. In fact, I mainly live on meat, fish, and seafood with, vegetables along with it. Some grains, I bake homemade bread and such. So, hey, I'm talking about a sandwich. I'll give you a bread recipe too. The nice thing about putting alfalfa sprouts on a sandwich is they kind of press together and act like a sponge. So they kind of soak up any condiments or sauces, and they're really nice on a sandwich. And while traditional turkey club is excellent, just made with lettuce, it is so much better with alfalfa sprouts. Ditto with a BLT. So I don't know, you might call that a bat if you do use alfalfa. I have no idea. But I like to make a mustard vinaigrette for both of these sandwiches and a homemade mayonnaise. So I get all that like mix of acidic and rich, creamy mayonnaise and fatty, and yeah, it's really good. And of course, the club sandwich, you're gonna have sliced turkey and bacon, and you really can't beat that, honestly. Especially if you use smoked turkey, which is what I usually do. And if you live in the mountains of North Carolina, maybe you got some bear bacon, which you might have if you live a little more traditionally. And it's fantastic, by the way. Bear bacon is actually better than pork bacon, in my opinion. So let's start with the vinaigrette. All right. So start with a good salad oil. You can use olive oil, walnut oil, whatever you like. Just maybe stay away from just vegetable oil or the cheap stuff from the grocery store that you might fry in. But if that's what you like, go for it. I don't care. Use corn oil, use peanut oil, whatever you like. Sesame oil has a stronger flavor and scent, but go for it if that's what you like. I usually will mix sesame oil with another oil when I'm using it for a salad dressing. Usually olive oil or something, or peanut oil, something neutral. Olive oil is not necessarily neutral, but anyway. You want a mix of about 3 to 1 of vinegar to oil and about 1/3 amount of the mustard to the oil. You can play around with the proportions, but that's just a good ballpark measurement. On their own, oil and vinegar, of course, will only mix briefly and then separate. I mean, you can't mix oil and water, right? Mustard, either prepared mustard, like, hot dog mustard, Creole mustard, whatever you like, Dijon, or dried mustard, mustard powder, will create an emulsion, and that keeps the dressing together, and it's what makes it work. Without an emulsifier, it just separates. They're not going to stay together. And this is the other thing about salads. Probably one of the biggest reasons a lot of Americans don't like salads, especially a lot of guys, is because they're not made right. You see, you don't put the salad on the plate or in the bowl in the kitchen or wherever. Put the salad dressing on it and then bring it to the table. The salad dressing runs off. It ends up in a pool in the bottom of the plate. You don't have a well-seasoned salad. Nothing comes together right. And 90% of the time, that's the way it's served in a restaurant or in a house. Salads should be tossed and dressed at the table. You need a salad bowl. Put your salad in there. Salt and pepper, whatever you like. Herbs. I always do a ton of herbs. Put your dressing in. Then take some of, preferably my hand-carved salad tongs, that are for sale on Judson Carroll Woodcraft, Substack.com. But you can even use your hands, and yes, I often just use my hands. Toss the salad together to mix everything together so you get a little bit of everything in each bite. With the dressing at that point, serve immediately. Do not dress the salad until you're ready to eat the salad. Now, that's true if you're using a vinaigrette like this, especially because it's oil and vinegar. It's going to run off, if it has a chance. But also, blue cheese, ranch. I've got recipes for blue cheese and ranch dressing in this book too. So, I mean, I am not a salad snob. I will definitely eat some ranch dressing, but that's anyone who's just had a wilted, mushy salad that's just not mixed well. The dressing sitting in the bottom of the plate. Nobody wants that, but that's how it's very often served to us. So, very basically, mix those 3 ingredients of whatever oil you like, whatever vinegar you like. I usually use a lower acid vinegar. Okay. Let me finish one point before I go to the second point. So mix those 3 ingredients together: oil, vinegar, mustard. You have a basic vinaigrette. Okay. Just whisk it up or use a fork. You're good to go. It will turn into an emulsion, a thick sauce, as opposed to a thin dressing. You can add anything you like to that. You can add herbs. You can add certainly salt and pepper. You can anything. If your tastes go in that direction, a pinch of sugar. It's no skin off my nose. Some fruit. Chopped up crushed raspberries or blackberries are always good, really, in a vinaigrette. That is one sweet component I certainly don't mind. A lot of people like honey. It's okay sometimes, but a little fruit is about as far as I'm going to go with that. That's the basic dressing, and it's going to be better than anything you can buy in a store, especially if you use a good oil and a good vinegar that tastes good to you. And that's where I was going. I like to use, I don't use white vinegar in a salad dressing. White distilled vinegar has no flavor. It's far too acidic. Sometimes I may use a little apple cider vinegar, but that's a little too acidic for me. Ditto with red wine vinegar, even though that would be my choice, my pick of those 3. I would definitely go with red wine vinegar because it does have a little bit of a fruitiness to it, a good complex flavor. Much better if you make it yourself than if you buy it. Another day, I'll tell you how to make your own vinegar. Really easy to do, really fun to do, absolutely delicious. It can become an absolute hobby for you. White wine vinegar is a little more mild. My favorites are sherry vinegar and rice wine vinegar. They're both a little sweet. They're both mildly acidic. They just work. and whichever's cheaper. I love rice wine vinegar. If I see a sherry vinegar that's cheaper, yeah, I'll grab it. Malt vinegar is good. That's probably the most popular vinegar in England. It has a little sweetness to it, but it's a little bit sharper than rice wine or sherry vinegar. Definitely avoid white distilled vinegar. It's just not worth using and not actually all that healthy for you. It's an industrial product. It has a lot of acidity, but basically no flavor and can actually irritate your stomach. So that's what I would use. You use what you like. Like to that mix, I always add crushed garlic. Absolutely any dried herbs or fresh that I have on hand that I think would be tasty. Parsley is, of course, essential for me. I put parsley in like everything I eat that isn't a dessert. Celery salt and parsley are both good flavor enhancers. Celery salt has a chemical in it. It's just celery leaves, by the way, mixed into salt. Stick it in the cabinet for a couple of months, and you'll have celery salt. It's wonderful stuff. And it actually has a similar chemical to MSG, so it's a major flavor enhancer without the side effects of MSG, which can be very bad for your health. So I love it. Carrot seeds are very similar as a flavor enhancer, but just go lightly with them. For a basic mix, yeah, any of those herbs. I would also always, if I have it on hand, add oregano, basil, dill, fennel tops, the tops of fennel, chives, tarragon, sage, rosemary, basically anything that I happen to have. And that's your vinaigrette. Now mayonnaise. You may think of that as a condiment, but it's really a classic French sauce. And making mayo takes a bit of practice. It's a technique more than a recipe, but you can absolutely do it. And the cost of mayonnaise these days is through the roof. I mean, it's crazy how much mayonnaise has. I mean, it's doubled, tripled in price during the Biden administration. Whereas most things have doubled in price, mayonnaise has basically tripled in price. And God help you if you buy your groceries with a credit card because your interest rate on your credit card's gone up over 20%. Yeah, not a fan of Biden. Anyway, you can make mayonnaise the old-fashioned way in a bowl with a whisk. That's how I do it. In a pinch, you can do it in a bowl with a fork. I have done that many, many times. If you have a food processor or a blender, it makes it like so easy and idiot-proof. I mean, and if you eat a lot of mayonnaise, I can't say I eat a lot of mayonnaise. I maybe go through a quart of mayonnaise every 2 months. I'm not a big mayonnaise eater. Now my uncle probably went through a quart of mayonnaise every week, if not 2 quarts a week. He was a mayonnaise fanatic. I don't think I could afford to buy all the mayonnaise that he would consume in a year, not in this economy. But if you make your own mayonnaise, it's only as expensive as the oil and eggs you use. I mean, it's seriously cheap and easy, and it's so much better. It tastes so much better than anything you'll buy in a store. So, like I said, I use a bowl and a whisk. I'm old-fashioned and part French. That's the way we do things. But anyway, start by separating 2 eggs. Be careful not to include any of the white with the yolk. In a bowl, beat the yolks with 2 teaspoons of lemon juice or vinegar. I really prefer lemon juice, but I would definitely use wine vinegar if in a pinch. Again, no white distilled vinegar on this one. But I guess if that's all I had, yeah, I'd use it. I have done it with apple cider vinegar before, and it really wasn't bad. You get that like tang or twang, I guess I would say, of the apple cider vinegar. And actually, I made a Caesar style dressing with that, and with the addition of a little Worcestershire sauce, it really was pretty good, actually. So yeah, use whatever vinegar you like. So again, you are whisking together 2 egg yolks with 2 teaspoons of lemon juice or vinegar. Lime juice would work, whatever. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. At this point, you can also add a 1/2 teaspoon or so of dry mustard powder or some prepared mustard, preferably Dijon or a homemade mustard. I'm going to teach you in this book how to make your own mustard from your own mustard seeds from wild mustard greens. You're going to love it. But anyway, yeah, I'd grab the Dijon if I had to get one off the shelf. The mustard makes it a little more foolproof. It makes an emulsion, just like it did with the vinaigrette. But it's not essential, and some people don't use any mustard at all. I like a little mustard in my mayo. I like the flavor, and I like the way it comes together and reduces the risk of it separating, the emulsion that is. Slowly add in 1 cup of olive oil or other good oil, and I do mean slowly. I mean you're whisking, and while you're whisking, add a drop at a time and whisk until that's completely incorporated into the emulsion, and keep doing that, just a drop, no more than 2 drops at a time, until half of the cup of the oil is incorporated into the emulsion. Once you've whisked in about a half a cup, mayo's getting thick, you can relax a bit, and you can add it in a thin stream or, teaspoonful at a time, whatever. The bottom line is, if you add the oil too fast, the emulsion will break and you end up with a mess. If you add it slowly, and this is true in a food processor, this is true in a blender, the trick is adding that oil a drop at a time, and then you can do it at a slow stream. And that will make the perfect mayonnaise. If your mayonnaise does happen to break, if that does happen, just beat another egg yolk with about a half cup of water. Slowly drip in about a 1/4 cup of oil, and then start adding your broken mayonnaise to it just a little bit at a time, and it should thicken right back up. And you can absolutely make dozens of variations on basic mayonnaise. You can add garlic, any herbs you like, whatever. I suppose if you really have to, you could mix some ketchup into it and make a sauce that some people call special for hamburgers, if you get my drift. Or Russian dressing, you might call it the same thing. Anyway, it's not actually a combination I like at all. All it is a combination of mayonnaise and ketchup and some relish and sweet pickle relish. It's just not my thing. Honestly, I detest McDonald's. I've never been a fan of McDonald's. I've gotten, I've eaten there, as a kid, we go to McDonald's every now and then. Sometimes the dehydrated onions they used on their burgers wouldn't be rehydrated enough, and they'll upset your stomach. So that was an early memory. I remember one time I was a kid eating at McDonald's, getting food poisoning, and throwing up like an hour later. And then I hadn't eaten there in like 20 years, seriously. Now, that doesn't mean I won't stop there and get a cup of coffee if I'm on the road. And they do a decent breakfast sandwich. If I have to stop somewhere and get something. The fries used to be really good when they cooked them in beef tallow, but now they're no good at all. But anyway, I stopped somewhere on the road, it's like the only option, and got a quarter pounder, Big Mac, something like that. And I've been into, I'm like, this has no flavor. Why are people lined up eating here? I think there's something about their food that's addictive. And I mean, I don't know what they put in it, but I mean, it's expensive, and I wouldn't. You would have to pay me to eat McDonald's food, and I would not be a happy camper. I certainly would not pay to eat that garbage, honestly. And if you're a McDonald's fan and if I've offended you, I apologize, but it's not good food. It literally has no flavor but sugar and salt. You can't even taste the meat. The pickle. That was the only thing I could taste on the entire hamburger was the 2 little slices of dill pickle. And even they were fairly bland. So, I don't get it. But anyway. So you've got your vinaigrette and you've got your mayo. Now let's make the bread. I promise you a bread recipe. Now, I usually bake bread about once a week. I use the modified recipe that I learned from a book called Artisan Bread in 5 Minutes a Day. That's by Jeff Hertzberg and Zoe Francois. I highly recommend that book. I mean, I don't mind kneading dough. I like to make traditional kneaded breads, but this artisan bread in 5 minutes a day, you make it up a batch. I use my KitchenAid stand mixer, but you can absolutely do it by hand. Put the dough in a pitcher, pop a lid in it, pop it in the fridge. Whenever you want fresh bread, you just pull some out, form your loaf, and let it rise for 30 minutes on the cabinet, and then bake for 30 minutes. So in an hour, you've got fresh baked bread with like no work. I mean, there's no work at all. So, I mean, I really do love this. And it's just remarkably convenient to mix up dough once a week and keep in the fridge so you're ready to bake. Their basic master recipe consists of 3 cups warm water, 1 packet of dry instant yeast, and 1.5 tablespoons of kosher salt, and 6.5 cups of all-purpose flour, or bread flour. I usually use bread flour. You mix it all together without kneading. Just get it all wet, essentially. Let it rise at room temperature for 2 hours, then put it in the refrigerator in a lightly sealed container. When ready to bake, pull off a chunk of the bread, about a third at a time is usually about right. Cut it off from the rest with a serrated knife. Form it into whatever loaf shape you like. In their book, they're always talking about making a boule out of it. That's easy. That's just a ball of dough. I use a loaf pan. I just use a regular old loaf pan, buttered. Just kind of form it into a football shape. Stick it in there. Let it rise. Cover it with a towel and leave the room. So about 45 minutes or so, it's ready to bake. Lightly flour the loaf. Put a couple of slashes across the top. Just lightly flour the top of the loaf, then a couple of slashes. I use an X-Acto knife. If you have an epee or something, you could absolutely use that. A razor blade, a sharp knife, whatever you like. I like my X-Acto knife, Then pop it in an oven at 450 degrees and bake it for 30 minutes or so. My oven doesn't quite work the same as theirs, so I actually found that 425 for 35 minutes works a little better for me, sometimes 40 minutes. Like I've said, I like to use a loaf pan rather than go to the trouble of making a baguette or anything like that. And I actually like to add a little oil to the dough just to have softer bread in case I want to make sandwiches out of it. It gets, you still get a good crusty crust, but just a little bit of oil added to the dough does make a difference as far as that. You can add a little sugar to the dough actually to make it a little softer if you want to. I let it rise about 15 minutes longer than they call for, and that last 15 minutes, I actually rise it in the oven set at about 150. So I let it set at room temperature for 45 minutes, turn my oven to 150, pop it in there for 15 minutes. And it gives me it makes the bread rise more. It gives you a better crumb, as they call it in baking. And I also add about a 1/4 teaspoon more salt to the dough because I think their dough is a little bland and needs some more salt. But other than that, yeah, it's super easy. And, the big trick I learned during the COVID lockdown when there was no yeast for sale in the store was how to keep a biga or a poolish going. So, in their recipe, they call for 1 pack of dry instant yeast. Well, just so happened when that happened, COVID lockdowns happened, I had 1 pack of dry instant yeast left. So I basically made this no-knead dough recipe, pulled off a chunk of it, put it in a jar, poured water over it, popped it in the fridge with the lid on, and the yeast stays alive inside that little dough ball inside the fridge, right? In fact, you have to kind of burp the jar every day for the first week or so, or it might explode because that yeast is still producing gas. And next time it was time for me to bake, instead of using a pack of dry instant yeast, I used that dough ball. Put it in there, same recipe, pulled off a chunk, put it back in the fridge, and I kept that biga or poolish going for over 3 years until last week when I made some bagels and forgot to pull off a chunk and ended up baking my biga. So that was not a good thing. Starting over from scratch. And the reason it's so good to do that biga or poolish or dough starter or whatever you want to call it, especially, my circumstances have not been to where I've been able to keep a sourdough starter for a couple of years. Been on traveling a lot, family issues. But it develops those flavors, those like sourdough type flavors. Those like when you eat a really good piece of pizza and the crust has that cheesy almost flavor. So that's my modification on that. So now you've got your bread and you've got your vinaigrette and you've got your mayonnaise, everything seasoned with herbs and absolutely to your taste. Of course, you can make a fantastic sandwich. So I like to slice my bread a little more thinly than the bread I might buy from a store because homemade bread's a little bit dense, and just toast it up a little bit to firm it up and butter each side of the bread. That's the secret to making a really good sandwich, is buttering your bread. I hate cutting my gums on hard toasted bread. So, that's a pet peeve of mine. I just very lightly toast the bread and butter at least on one side, And if you're using mayo, maybe you don't want to butter it on both sides. It doesn't bother me to butter it on both sides. I think it makes the sandwich taste better. But and of course, you can also fry your bread. You can butter it and fry it like you would for a grilled cheese. That makes a really nice variation. If you don't want to toast it, oh wow, yeah, fried bread sandwiches are fantastic. But anyway, sprinkle a little celery salt on the buttered side, and that will really just bring out the flavor of everything. And after that, it's totally up to you. I like to spread mayo on one slice of bread and put the sliced tomato on top of that so the tomato juice kind of forms a sauce with the mayo. Then I add some finely sliced onions or ramps. Then comes the meat, bacon, ham, turkey, etc. On top of that, I put sliced pickles so that the pickle juice kind of soaks into the meat, and a slice of Swiss or provolone or any other good cheese. Then a nice handful of alfalfa sprouts or other leafy vegetable. There are a lot of leafy vegetables in this book you could use, or you can use lettuce or spinach. But yeah, I love the alfalfa sprouts because, like I said, it soaks up the vinaigrette. A few extra herbs. Douse the alfalfa sprouts with your vinaigrette. Then any fresh herbs from the garden you want to put on there, salt and pepper to taste, and the sandwich is good to go. Only way you can make it better is pickled onions instead of raw onions, and it is just fantastic. And of course, alternatively, you could use sprouts in any kind of sprouts in stir fries or as a garnish in a salad. You can mix the alfalfa seeds, unsprouted or sprouted. Some people do sprouted. In fact, Sally Fallon recommends you do this sprouted into a bread dough to add nutrition. Like I said, in a survival situation, alfalfa or other sprouted seeds could absolutely save your life. So I think it's great. And medicinal uses for alfalfa. Alfalfa leaves, this is according to Plants for a Future, either fresh or dried, have traditionally been used as a nutritive tonic to stimulate the appetite and promote weight gain. The plant has an estrogenic acid action and could prove useful in treating problems related to menstruation and menopause. I think it's more the flowers of the plant, actually. Some caution is advised in the use of the plant. It should not be prescribed to people with autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis. So that's sort of the caution against it. The plant is antiscorbutic, perient, diuretic, oxytocic, hemostatic, nutritive, stimulant, and tonic. Let's see what all that means. All right, it has some vitamin C in it, so keep you from getting scurvy. It helps remove excess fluid from the body. It can actually stimulate oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone. Good for the liver, nutritious, stimulant to the digestive system, and tonic. I think, again, they're talking more like a digestive tonic. It's good for the stomach. The expressed juice is emetic and also anodyne in the treatment of gravel. So I guess if you had enough of the juice of the plant, it can make you throw up, but can also help with kidney stones and such. The plant taken internally for debility in convalescence or anemia, hemorrhage, menopausal complaints, premenstrual tension, fibroids. A poultice of the heated leaves has been applied to the ear in the treatment of earache. The leaves can be used fresh or dry. The leaves are rich in vitamin K, which is used medicinally to encourage the clotting of blood. It is valuable in the treatment of jaundice and is rich in chlorophyll and carotene, both of which have proven health benefits. The leaves also contain the antioxidant tricin. The root is febrifuge, which means it helps with a fever, and also prescribed in cases of highly colored urine. Extracts of the plant are antibacterial. So there is a very useful plant that I guess everybody at the extension office or your horticulture department is going to consider it a weed. All the hippies at the health food store are going to consider it a health food. And I just consider it a great wild plant and a great plant to cultivate. And as a permaculturist, it's also one of the very best cover crops because alfalfa can put roots down yards deep into the soil. And it's a nitrogen fixer. So it actually pulls nitrogen from the atmosphere and fixes it in the soil. So you don't have to buy chemical fertilizer, and you can have healthier food. So, wow. So that's literally the first chapter of my book, Spring Foraging Cookbook. I taught you how to make a vinaigrette, a mayonnaise, to make homemade bread, and a fantastic turkey and bacon club or BLT or whatever you want. great ham sandwich, whatever floats your boat out of alfalfa. And what a very appropriate place to start this cookbook because, like I said, I've been eating alfalfa sprouts since I could eat solid food. I mean, and really, I love them. I grew up on them. What do you expect? But anyway, let's get on to our medicinal herb from the weeds and grasses. Medicinal weeds and grasses of the American Southeast, and it is Erechtites. Hieraclifolius. Like I said, also known as Burnweed, American Burnweed, Butterweed, Eastern Burnweed, Fireweed, Pilewort, White Fireweed. Pilewort's a fairly common name for it as well. So, it's occasionally collected as a wild edible. I also will talk about this in my foraging cookbook, but not at this length. I'm going to really get into the medicinal uses here. King's Medical Dispensatory of 1898 tells us that fireweed is reputed to be emetic, cathartic, tonic, astringent, and alternative. And as we just said, emetic means it can, in large amounts, can make you throw up, like an epicac. Cathartic means it could actually clean you out the other way. Tonic means probably good for the digestion in this instance. Astringent tightens tissues. Alternative is actually more of the correct word for what most people would say a tonic. It means like generally tonifying or strengthening to the entire system, especially the immune system. So, of course, the amount of this you were to consume would dictate how it acted in your system. So, of which the most valuable are the latter three. That was the tonic, astringent, alternative. Reputed as an unrivaled medicine in diseases of the mucous tissue of the lungs, stomach, and bowels. So, good for lung ailments, stomach ailments, and bowel ailments. A spirituous extract of the plant, meaning a tincture. Spirituous extract just means that you soak the plant in alcohol. Was recommended by Dr. A.R. Wyeth of Pennsylvania in the treatment of cholera and dysentery. In the latter disease, promptly arresting the mucosanguineous discharges. That means bloody mucousy diarrhea, so the bad kind, the real bad kind. Relieving pain and effecting a speedy cure. In summer complaints of children, he has found it to prove almost invariably successful, even in cases where other means have failed. Now that is a very common statement in old herbals. You see in the Cherokee herbal, they keep talking about the summer sickness, summer ailment, and it took me forever to figure out what the heck we were talking about. It's apparently diarrhea that was more common before water and food sanitation in the hot months. So makes a lot of sense. Could also have something to do with overheating of the system, but I do think it's probably a bacterial diarrhea that was common in the hot months, before pasteurization and city water and all that. When people were just drinking out of creeks and such, there was probably a bacterial or probably bacterial flush of some sort that would happen in the hot weather months. Professor Robert Bartholomew, at the instance of the authors of Drugs and Medicines of North America, experimented physiologically and therapeutically with the true oil of fireweed. He found it to possess general characteristics of the antiseptic group. It proved to be non-irritant to the stomach and rather to improve the appetite and digestion. So that would also be a reason it might help with bacterial or maybe amoebic, something in the water during the hot summer months. On account of its stimulating effects upon the gastrointestinal glands and probably upon the pancreas, an abundant secretion is poured out, rendering the alveolar evacuations easy, frequent, and copious, thus proving very useful in habitual constipation and especially benefiting such cases with acid fermentation and flatulence. So also good for constipation, at least in an oil taken from the plant. He states that in membranous enteritis, an affection difficult to cure, it has seemed to be in a high degree useful. It first stimulates the heart, dilates the arteries, and sends a glow of warmth throughout the body. Wow. Secondarily, perspiration ensues. The sense of warmth is succeeded by a lowering of the temperature. So that's how it works as a diaphoretic. And apparently it's working through the cardiac system. Interesting. It increases the temperature of the body and induces sweating, and that breaks a fever. That's just a big, complicated way of saying it breaks a fever. It slows the pulse and contraction of the arterioles. Following this, there's a rise in vascular tension. It is rapidly diffused, quickly absorbed, and quickly excreted, a limitation taking place most largely by the lungs, and less so by the kidneys and skin. So you actually expirate it, you breathe it out. It's very interesting. He concluded that it is important, its most important therapeutic action is in disorders of the parts by which it is eliminated. In other words, very good for, as he stated, chronic bronchitis, pulmonic affections, pulmonary issues, and catarrh of the air tubes, congestion of the lungs. We're talking, pleurisy, we're talking pneumonia, we're talking, anything from whooping cough to tuberculosis even. Chest neuroses and coughs of a local origin. It may also be used by inhalation. Benefit was derived from its use in the genitourinary catarrh, peliitis, gleet, cystitis, etc. The drug also allaying nervous irritability, and Professor Bartholomew, being a kid having grown up watching Spaceballs, I have trouble saying the name Bartholomew. You may remember that the John Candy played Barf, or Bartholomew, the man dog, the Mog, who was the sidekick to Lone Star in one of the greatest movies ever made. I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan. But anyway, Professor Bartholomew further suggests its value in sciatica, muscular rheumatism, and cognate affections. Professor Hale, on part of the homeopaths, gives it quite a list of effects of the oil and tincture in large doses and concludes that its action is chiefly upon the vascular system. Very odd to see large doses of anything used by homeopaths, but hey, he liked it. He said, as oil of fireweed upon the market is generally oil of fleabane. We'll actually talk about fleabane or Erechtites in the next episode. There is some interchangeability among the two plants. Fleabane is extremely useful for colitis, irritable bowel, various things like that. So you can see where there would be some interchangeability. But he said it is very probable that the product used by homeopaths has been the Origeron oil. So he's saying, well, I'll just skip his thing because he's saying he's really not sure if he's using Erechtites or Origeron. But they are somewhat similar. Under specific indications and uses, King's American Medical Dispensatory says, for catarrhal states of the mucous membranes, that means congested mucous membranes, passive hemorrhages, albuminaria, I'm not sure what albuminaria is, I'll have to look that one up at some point, dropsy, pale, waxy skin, swelling of the feet, and scanty urine. Apparently, which are all symptoms of this albuminaria. Okay. So Jethro Kloss wrote of the plant in the about 1920s or so. The whole Back to Eden movement. They were Seventh-day Adventists, real big on total abstinence from alcohol and tobacco and caffeine, really strict diets, no spicy foods. He's pretty good herbalist, though, even if his dietary advice was insane. Jethro Kloss wrote, he was also one of the people who popularized vegetarianism in America. Yes, he was a vegetarian, even a vegan, and that's like probably the second most unhealthy diet one can possibly adopt is the vegan or vegetarian diet, especially the vegan. Probably the only thing less healthy than that would be to eat every meal at McDonald's or something. So yeah, moderation in all things, and getting as much nutrition means getting as many nutrients from as many food sources as possible, which means not only all the plants, but all the meats and fish as well, because we need animal fats especially to be healthy, animal proteins as well. So I've written extensively about the dangers of the vegan and vegetarian diet, having tried it in my youth, and it ruined my health and made me probably clinically depressed for a couple of years. It's not healthy, and it's not natural. It's not normal. We have teeth both for grinding up plants and seeds, and we have teeth for cutting meat. Our bodies are made to do both. We are omnivores. That's why my first cookbook, my most popular cookbook, is The Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking. We need to eat the greatest variety of foods we can to be in optimal health and to have the best tasting food. I'm sorry, but these you go to any vegan restaurant and look at vegan recipes, their so-called natural foods are packed full of artificial chemicals to try to make them taste good because they're disgusting. Vegan food is not good unless you add a bunch of MSG, which I don't care if you want to call it, yeast extract. It's MSG, and a bunch of other, nasty stuff. And trust me, even the cheapest, worst made hot dog, the old, nasty sidewalk vendor, lips and snouts and tails, whatever, offcuts a hot dog is better for you than a fake hot dog made with soy, a not dog. Really, it is. And the only issue there would be the nitrates or nitrites, and even I make my own sausage, so I don't use a lot of that. If I want to use a little bit of curing salt, I use a little bit of curing salt. Not enough to matter. There's actually a lot more nitrates and nitrites used in regular vegan food just to give it some frickin' flavor, because it's nasty. But anyway. So other than being a lunatic, Jethro Kloss was a pretty good herbalist. And he said part used entire plant, medicinal properties, astringent, tonic, emetic, and alterative. Same uses as before. But he says it is strongly astringent and therefore most excellent in diseases of the mucous membranes, colon troubles, cholera, and dysentery. It will quickly relieve pain in these conditions, is specific for piles, that's hemorrhoids, very effective for children for summer diarrhea, there we have that again. It gives prompt relief when taken very hot. This is also the time before pasteurization, which I am not a fan of, but also refrigeration of milk. So maybe the milk was starting to turn a little bit in the summer heat. I don't know. Maybe not, because the Cherokee before being integrated into American culture. I mean, Cherokee, North Carolina is not just an Indian reservation. It's a county in North Carolina, and they're just as. I mean, I've grown up around the Cherokees and Catawbas and Lumbees. You don't think of them as being any different from just regular Southern people. They just have a slightly different hue of their skin and hair. They love the Atlanta Braves, and they go hunting and fishing and, work as your, regular guy next door. Drive pickup trucks. We go hunting and fishing together. We have a good time. But they did not keep cattle before, fairly recent times, 150 years maybe, and so they wouldn't have had milk. So I'm still going to say it's probably a water contaminant issue. Could have been both, though. Anyway, it says it gives prompt relief when taken very hot, excellent remedy for fevers, and as a tonic and blood purifier, taken for only 1 week at a time. Take the capsules with a swallow of milk. Steep a heaping teaspoonful in a cup of boiling water for 30 minutes with cool. Drink 1 to 2 cups a day, 1 swallow at a time. Peterson Field Guide for Medicinal Plants says, tea or tincture of the whole plant, formerly used as astringent and tonic in mucous tissue ailments of the lungs, bowels, stomach, and also used externally for muscular rheumatism, sciatica. Used for diarrhea, cystitis, dropsy, etc. neglected by scientific investigators. So what Peterson's telling you is that it's a very useful plant, and modern medicine has not explored it to use it, and instead our agricultural agencies call it a weed and want you to eradicate it. And I'm telling you, it's very, very useful herbal medicine. Four, in past times, I've helped people, especially women with bladder infections and cystitis. I've using either Erechtites or Origeron. That's either this Burnweed, Fireweed, or Canada fleabane. Used it for diarrhea cases, especially severe diarrhea that just like won't stop. Good for the lung issues. I've used it in many, many ways. The fleabane, which we'll talk about next week, is a little more common where I live, but they are both fairly common, and I do use them fairly interchangeably. But we have a lot more documented use of fleabane, of Origeron. It has been much more looked into and is more common among herbalists than the Erechtites. So I'll do a shorter recipe next week and a longer entry on Canada fleabane, or actually we got a couple varieties of fleabane we'll talk about. So y'all have a great week. I don't know about you, but I am craving a sandwich now. So I am going to go toast up and butter some bread and slice some turkey and make somewhat of a version of the sandwich I discussed in today's show. Some good mayo on there, and it's wintertime. I don't have a lot of fresh herbs, so I'm going to have to put some extra dry herbs in my vinaigrette. But anyway you look at it, it's going to be a fantastic lunch. Hope y'all have a fantastic lunch or supper or whatever you're doing. And remember, these books are the Spring Foraging Cookbook, the Medicinal Weeds and Grasses of the American Southeast. I mentioned the Omnivore's Guide to Home Cooking, and I think those are the only 3 books I mentioned on the show, but remember I have written 13 books now, so find me on Amazon, or you can buy the books directly from me as a PDF. They're all listed. Really the easiest place to read about all of my books is go to southernappalachianherbs.blogspot.com. They're all there on my Substack, judsoncarroll.com as well, or you can find them all on Amazon. But the Southern Appalachian Herb site just is a little bit better organized, I think. So be sure to check them out. And if you'd like to buy one of my books, I'm always grateful for it. I always appreciate it. I say a prayer for every single person who buys my books, and for all the blessings you may need. So y'all, talk to you next time. Have a good one.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.